Hey guys, I'm Brent.
I'm Lila, and you can find us on the web at www.braintrustlive.com.
Yes.
We realize we're coming to you from the end times, but we decided that we're going to open with something more hopeful on the democracy end and lead with some stories about voting.
Well, we spent too much time being depressed. So
Well,
the fact that
I mean, an earthquake even happened. So it's like, I don't even have time anymore. I thought I had reached sort of like maximum shock and depression. And then the earthquake happened. It turned out there were untapped stores of anxiety that were still available for me to experience.
That earthquake for me was actually one where I just sort of like, I had just come in from walking my dog. It felt very weird outside. And both my boyfriend and I were commenting on how like it felt eerie. It was like very quiet. And it was like almost midnight anyway, but it was just like, it was like bizarre.
Just an off time.
It was and then like we got back in and then there was the earthquake. And normally I am like, will panic and like immediately hide under something. I was just sort of like, just let it take me.
It was one of those long ones where I had time to like wander around my house and wonder what I should do.
Right. If I could be under rubble for a couple days where there's no news, then
might be okay.
that would have been my preference for the next, like 48 to 72 hours. I would have been okay with that, I think.
I feel like an earthquake for me, an earthquake generates like a physical reaction that I can't control. And so while I felt actually pretty at peace by that night, because I was just like, well, once everything's shit, why keep stressing about it? Like I was feeling very calm because I was just like, my worst case scenario that I kept worrying about happened.
Yep.
And then it's just like, once your worst case scenario has happened, why keep panicking? You already did the panicking before. Now it's happened. You get the joy of being right, at least. And so I was just sort of like hanging out. And then it turned out that the earthquake had sort of like a separate reaction that was not responsive to my feeling of maxed out, like emotional sort of stress.
Yeah.
It was just like my heart started pounding. I started shaking and I felt like I had no control over it. And I was just like, I don't have time for both of these things to happen at once.
Yeah.
I'm either in an adrenaline rush or I feel fine with the end of the world happening. I can't have both happening at once.
Right.
So I just felt like it was a rude earthquake. And I was right in the middle of watching AOC's response to Ruth Bader Ginsburg's passing.
Right.
And so I was starting to feel a little motivated, at least, like my righteous rage could lead me forward. And then a fucking earthquake happened, which is so rude. In any case, we start with voting.
Yeah.
In-person voting began this week in 4 states, which is always so exciting.
It is.
If you live in Virginia, Minnesota, Wyoming, or South Dakota, you could be voting right now. And if you live in Virginia, you could be waiting in line right now because they had huge lines, which is it's a great sign and also just a great visual, I think, for to sort of show how excited everyone is to get out to vote.
Yeah, it's a nice early kind of like look at us
boon. Go. Yeah. Right. Also, there were widely dispersed images of Trumpers protesting at polling sites, illegally blocking polling sites. And I've got to tell them, that's also a great way to get Democrats to the polls. And I would cut that shit out right away if I were you.
Yeah.
I get what you're up to. You're trying to intimidate voters away from the polls. But the thing is, you don't have time to be out there for all of the next 45 days. So there's going to be a time those people can vote. And you also are only creating a visual that nationally makes it look like not only do we have to vote, but we have to bring an army of people to stay safe. Yep. And so, I mean, just as voter suppression efforts in the past have led to huge turnout in regions that don't even have any polling places, half of Alabama and a lot of districts in Florida and a lot of districts in Ohio where they continually and in high publicized ways take away polling places, this feels like a sort of subversive effort to get Democratic voters to the polls. And listen, if that's your plan, fine. But I got to tell you, it's not the plan for your side. It's not a great Republican strategy. So if that's what you're up to, I have pioneered the idea and everyone is welcome to make use of this idea. I can't have pioneered. I'm one of the people who pioneered this idea.
Sure. You one of the pioneers.
Of having voter escorts bring people through those protests and have those voter escorts be middle-aged white ladies. Because if, we've just discovered the power of Karen-ness. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a power that we can turn into a useful power if we think about it right. So if you live in a place where you have Trumpers blocking your polling place, if you get a bunch of angry middle-class white ladies to escort, they are not afraid of a bunch of fucking Trumpers.
No,
they're not afraid of anything. So I would make use of that annoying neighbor that you have. Get them to bring some teenagers to the polls or something. Because, you know, you got a lot of 18-year-olds might not realize that we don't normally have to do this to vote. In any case, a ton of states are mailing their mail-in ballots this weekend. There are a lot of states that are, I think maybe 9 states are sending ballots to everyone or sending at least applications to everyone. And then there are states that keep adding to that list all the time. So Rhode Island is now sending a ballot request form to everyone. I think they're doing that in Wisconsin. And so find out when you can expect your ballot. Make sure that you get it. I also want to remind people that Virginia does not traditionally have no excuse absentee voting, but they do this year. So if you are someone who thinks to yourself that you can't vote early in Virginia or vote absentee in Virginia because you don't have a good excuse, you don't need one. So go anyway. And our prop guide is coming out soon. We're going to have a little bit more on some of the props. We're going to be bringing you information about props piecemeal as we go through the prop guide. But as a reminder for California residents, our voter registration deadline is October 19th. But I mean, you should be registered to vote.
Yeah, you should be, because you can actually even vote prior to that.
Exactly.
I think you can start voting on October 4th.
If you are someone who is really excited about getting people registered to vote, Godspeed, go forth. But remember, voting doesn't end with registering, and that you need to make sure that those people also cast ballots after you've helped them register. So make sure that you stay on everyone past the point where they've just registered to vote, and then they can vote, but they don't anyway. But
also in California, I saw one of them in the flesh the other day. It was very exciting. We have
saw one of what?
Drop boxes.
Oh, you saw a drop box?
Yes, they're putting them at all of the, well, maybe not all, but most anyway, but they're putting them at public libraries.
Oh, sure.
For you to be able to drop off your ballots as opposed to doing it at a polling place.
Yeah, Massachusetts is doing this. I only know because I was on a family chat with family in Massachusetts, and they had just spotted their first ballot box. So a lot of states are going to be having drop boxes, and that's a good, safe way to vote by mail without having to buy a stamp, which you shouldn't have to do to vote. And some states are requiring you to do.
And some you have to have 2.
That's right.
Extra postage. Yeah.
As a reminder, if you want to vote in person, and there's a lot of ways to pre-fill out your ballot and either drop it at a ballot box or drop it at a polling place or whatever. So if you have a ballot already, just fill it out. Why not? But to vote in person, you're going to have to relinquish your mailed-in ballot. So bring it with you if you decide that you do want to vote in person.
Like if you're in Los Angeles and you want to use one of the fancy new voting machines.
Right.
And you have to take your mail-in ballot with you and give it to them, or they're not going to let you do that.
Don't forget to do that, because otherwise they'll make you vote provisionally, and that is not as fun.
That's
but
annoying.
If you forget to do that, and it's election day, because for some reason you ignored all of our efforts to get you to vote long before election day, you can still vote provisionally if you forget to do that. So don't not vote.
Yeah.
Also, if you're not in California, learn what the voting laws mean practically in your state. I think this Virginia law is a good example of that, where you know, the term absentee voting might imply to voters in Virginia, because of their experience with it, that you need an excuse. Make sure that you know what the actual law is about casting an absentee ballot or an early vote in your state. Figure out what it actually means. In New York State, you know, if you need to use COVID, you know, if you have a state without no excuse absentee voting, find out how you can have an appropriate excuse in that state to use absentee voting or mail-in voting. If you live in a state, you know, that has early voting, but the early voting is via absentee ballot at your Board of Elections instead of at a polling location, make sure that you let people know that when you're, you know, admonishing them to vote early, so that everyone is prepared and knows the terminology, because it's different in every state. As we are reminded every year, not only do they call their Board of Elections something different in every state, but they often call provisional ballots something different. They will often call absentee voting something different. They will certainly call their proposition something different, because there are questions and amendments. And
I love the state questions.
The state questions are hilarious. Yeah, I know. So learn the terminology beforehand so that you can you can pepper people with your knowledge about the terminology as you go, which is the best part of election day, is being an expert in something.
That's right.
It's like a time that you're entitled to just like tell everyone what to do, which is the most fun thing in the world.
Right.
In any case. So that's that on voting. Do it soon. And if you're in California, our prop guide is going to be at you soon. And also, if you want to know, if you have questions about your ballot in California that go beyond what we present here on the podcast, email us or DM us or something.
Yeah, we will enjoy finding the answer for you.
We will literally research random things on your ballot for you. We do that every year for random strangers in places that we don't live, and we enjoy it, and we're always happy to do it. So, and if we can't do it, we always make sure that you are directed to a resource. So we are here to help you vote in whatever way you need us to help.
That's right.
Now, on to the terrible news about the end of democracy, now that we've just told you about all the voting you should be doing.
Yeah.
Listen, people should be getting in the habit of retiring before their 80th birthday, even when they have lifetime appointments. And this week really illustrates why that's important to do.
I mean, look, we should all mourn the loss of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We should all say all of the nice things that you are seeing everyone say about her. You know, she, look, she was on the court for 27 years. She
pioneer for women's rights. She's protected women's autonomy. Sure.
And she has certainly become like a cultural icon in the last few years. And like, we get it. She's a badass. Keep saying all the nice things about her that you would like to. It is also okay to remind people that this didn't have to be this way.
That's right. And by the way, this doesn't have to be this way for a number of members of the court, because almost every member of the court is too old. Now, I would contend once you start having chronic health issues, where your untimely passing will surprise and shock a nation in our lowest moment, that's something to consider whether that's a situation you want to put us in. Because unlike with almost any other position in government, Supreme Court justices are the only people that can decide when they're going to leave.
Yeah.
We cannot force them out. We cannot ask them to leave. I mean, we can ask anyone to do anything, but we can't force them to leave. We can't, there are no term limits. They are there for life. So it is entirely their decision whether or not they want to retire. And frankly, often in this modern era, an untimely passing from a justice has the power to throw like a huge wrench into the system at critical moments. And while I think that we should be talking nationally about whether maybe we want to have fixed terms for these folks, so that this does not keep happening to us. We also need to impress upon justices themselves, and I would say some elected members of Congress and the Senate, that it is there comes a time where where you have to sort of in an effort to protect your legacy and the sort of governing consensus, you have to make a choice about whether you're the best person to remain in the position that you're in. And it's unfortunate that also, you know, I think part of the discussion on the court is always that justices like to think that they are above politics and above the political realities of the moment, but they are not.
Right.
And to pretend otherwise is to be blind to only the most obvious political strain, you know, political cultural moments of the last 40 years. So, you know, I think it is not necessarily wise for us to even encourage justices to think that they somehow serve above politics, because they don't. And I know that that is the ideal, but that's not a reality that actually has ever existed at any time. So I feel like, let this be a moment where we think to ourselves, A, why is there not a single millennial in the Senate who will help usher in a Supreme Court justice who could be on the court for the next 40 to 50 years? Why is our entire leadership people that are over 75 in every level, in every party? And why is there anyone over 80 on the Supreme Court?
Right.
And also, why should those be lifetime appointments if if they have the power to create this kind of instability? Yeah,
I mean, they're all fair questions. You know, I think there's been, you know, a lot of tweets and memes going around over the last sort of 48 hours about, like, you know, like the democracy hanging on by, like, you know, the thread of an 87-year-old woman with chronic health problems. And it's kind of like, do we need to be living in that world?
No, all of this whole world's man-made, you guys. Just as money is an invention, the rules that govern our courts are inventions.
Right.
And the Republicans are proving that because they constantly defy them. So if they can do that, then we don't have to feel beholden to precedents that no longer serve us And I think this might be a time to think about which precedents are serving us in the long-term sense, because I think there's always this kind of sense that the laws of the justice system should be immovable because that's justice. But the way that we conceive of what justice is has changed really dramatically in the last few decades, because justice didn't used to apply to everyone. And this system enshrines a system in which justice still only applies to the people who have access to governance, which is not most people at the moment. Yeah. So it just doesn't, it's not as divorced from ideology as the rhetoric around the courts always is meant to suggest, and to pretend otherwise is nonsense talking.
Right.
And I have a bone to pick with the Democrats because their new line, and even I think like somebody like Jacobin or somebody was writing about how this is genius because we should finally go low. And I kind of agree that we should go low, but I don't think this is how to go low. Is the Democrats are saying that the reason that we shouldn't allow Republicans to appoint somebody in either before the election or in the lame duck term is because it was RBG's dying wish that they not. As if her dying wish has anything to do with how the government should function.
Right.
We shouldn't do it because they stole a Supreme Court seat from us when Scalia died in 2015.
Yeah.
That's why we shouldn't do it. We shouldn't do it because their own precedent was that they can't do this. Right. We should not do it because RBG's dying wish. Well, who cares what her dying wish was? I mean, if you're a family member or friend, I of course care what her dying wish is. But I mean, the U.S. government is not beholden to anyone's dying wish. It is beholden to the rule of law.
Well, right, and
it makes us sound like funny farm people. It doesn't make us sound
it does. And I also think it's the wrong way to go in terms of like what might actually work anyway. Yes. I mean, look, I don't trust.
Petty sounding.
I was going to say, I don't trust any of these Republican senators, but like if you're going to convince enough of them, and we're going to get into the list of who might be convinced to not vote on this until after a new president and Senate is installed. If you're going to be able to convince any of them of anything, it's going to be on the precedent of what happened in 2016. And it's going to be some of these guys who are quote unquote institutionalists. And like, look, I don't have much hope about that. I'm not saying that I think that will work, but I think that you're going to have more chance of convincing Lamar Alexander that a precedent has been set and we need to stick to that than you are going to be able to convince him of that he should stick to the dying wish of a woman who he didn't agree with the weather on, you
exactly.
know? Like he
also,
doesn't.
We have like 20 of these fuckers on record saying that the exact thing they're about to attempt to do should not be legal and should not happen.
Right.
Like go low on that.
Yes.
Play those words in front. Like it's like when we were hitting the halls of Congress to advocate for the Zadroga Act, one thing that responders always came prepared with, and I thought was genius, was they printed out everyone's never forget tweets every year and brought them to their offices. So we would go into these Republican offices, we would tell them this horrifying story, and then we would show them their tweet about how they should never forget us. And as much as that was uncomfortable, because they didn't want to be faced with a harsh reality that they had been using us for our symbolism without giving us what we needed, it was a really effective strategy because it shamed them. And it not only shamed them, but it gave us their own words to shame them with publicly.
Right.
That is how you build an effective case in an election year. Because remember, we're in an election year. So this is a unique environment. This is not them getting to act in a vacuum. There are going to be real consequences for their personal careers on the line based on the decision they make here. So the idea of going with this silliness answer that is about our feelings, who cares about our feelings? They certainly don't.
They don't.
I don't even care about our feelings.
Yeah.
Our feelings are bullshit. They're already hurt.
You're certainly not going to get any of those guys to like care about the dying wishes of somebody.
Right. Or the hopes and dreams of a bunch of young women who were inspired by RBG. Like that's something for us to have for ourselves. But certainly first of all, our feelings are there. We don't have feelings anymore. If you still have feelings and you're a Democrat, get with the program.
Right. Remember like a couple months ago, I said that we were living in a post-feelings time. Remember, like
Brent called it, and it's like you guys didn't even listen. We're past feelings. There are no more feelings. Don't have feelings. The only feeling that you should have is righteous rage.
Yeah.
And you should use that righteous rage to do something instead of feeling sad about this and hoping that they are polite about her dying wish, which I would contend should not be a consideration even in the best of times.
Sure.
the rule of law should be a consideration.
Yeah.
Precedent should be a consideration. The functioning of government should be a consideration. Anyone's cockamamie dying wish should not be how we determine what our laws are going to be. Ridiculous talking point. And I guarantee it was not her intention as she said that. Like, first of all, how tragic that she had to have this be her last thought.
Right.
But she knew what she'd gotten us into. I just like, I mean, clearly, like.
No, I know.
She knew.
No, I was going to say.
You could tell.
I was going to say, part of that statement is her own guilt. You know, I mean, she feels bad.
It was clear.
She feels bad.
It's been clear for a couple years to me that she knows she made a mistake.
Yeah.
Because her health has been failing, and she has been hanging on in a way that someone in her condition should not have had to. And they've all been pretending that it's been about how much she loves the work. But frankly, by your 8th pancreatic cancer round, I don't know how much you can love. No one loves the work that much. Yeah. I know that she knows what she did.
She was hanging on to try and get.
She was hanging on to try to protect our right to choose. Yeah. And, you know, I wish they had weekend at Bernie'd her, because I sort of feel like at this point, there's no rules anymore. Donald Trump is the president. He violates the law every day.
Yeah, right.
Weekend at Bernie's for
like somebody else has probably been writing and doing everything for her anyway. Like, could those people have just continued to do so?
Has anyone seen or heard from Clarence Thomas in 30 years? No, but he's still on the court. She doesn't even say anything. But in any case, my point is, the tragedy of her having to have that be her last thought is about her owning that she knows what she did.
Yeah.
It's not about creating a talking point for Democrats who want to make us feel guilty about not honoring the dying. Like, we should feel guilty about destroying the sort of the validity of our government. Like, that's what we should feel guilty about. In any case.
Yeah.
That said, Democrats had a real killer fundraising night after
they sure
that.
Did.
People really flipped out.
They did.
And another thing I would say before we move on is that I think an odd way that I've managed to maintain some slim glimmer of hope in this last few months is it seems like the other shoe drops so often that we're like out of shoes. And at this point, like, anything could still happen before Election Day. Totally. This isn't the last act before Election Day. This isn't our last hope, because something even crazier will probably happen on Friday. So I feel like, I was actually having this conversation with an aunt of mine earlier today where she was like, I feel like I'm usually prepared for everything, and this is a moment where you have to be prepared for anything, and that distinction is really important. And I would contend, as somebody who likes to take trips and not make plans, that I'm a person who thrives in being prepared for anything, but not being prepared for everything. I'm very rarely prepared for specific things. I'm just prepared to roll with the circumstance.
Yeah.
And we should be prepared to roll with it, because this is not the last thing that's going to happen before Election Day. Right. We're not even in October. We haven't had the October surprise yet.
Right. There's going to be October surprises. Yeah.
Yeah. In any case, Act Blue raised like $30 million overnight for Senate candidates.
Yeah.
Even Crooked Media raised $2 million in less than 2 hours, and they have now gone over $20 million just themselves in their Get Mitch or Die Trying fund, which I checked does not go to Amy McGrath, which I approve of.
Good.
Because it only goes to frontline seats that are actually winnable.
Yeah.
So I was happy to hear that. But they've raised like a ton of money for that fund.
Yeah, and she doesn't need fundraising help either.
No, she has all the money in the world. What she doesn't have is ideas or a compelling candidacy.
Right.
So, I mean, you can have millions upon millions of dollars and not win based on being a shitty candidate. Plenty of people have spent millions of dollars and lost races. Yeah. Hillary Clinton has done that, in fact.
Totally.
In any case, Mitch McConnell's a monster. So he, within a few hours of her passing, promised to fill the seat, quote, without delay, and said, President Trump's nominee will receive a vote on the floor of the United States Senate. So we are going to do you the service, because we know that you live all over the country, of listing every single GOP senator who has in the past said they would not vote on an election year nominee.
Yep.
Because it's important that you know who we're dealing with. And I would also contend, because one thing I've been voicing a lot in this last year is how frustrated I am that we don't seem to have any Democrats that are up to this moment. So call your Democratic senators too, and tell them to figure something the fuck out. Like this, in a precedent-breaking year, their last play cannot just be to threaten to pack the court in 3 months.
Right.
They have another play. They're just not thinking of it because they don't know how to.
Or they are, and we just
they're not willing to go there.
Or we just don't know what it is yet. Also, I mean, I feel like they haven't even had it. What's that?
That's wishful thinking.
I mean,
Chuck
I think
Schumer
it's wishful thinking too, but like we haven't even had a day at the office yet where where this has been a thing. And Nancy Pelosi, who again, I'm 100% with you that I don't necessarily trust these people on this, because she could also shut down the government if she wants to, but like is not going to do that because she thinks that that's bad, and she's not wrong about that. But like also like I think are sort of at a point where like we've had a government shut down before and we came back and like things were fine. Like, do we need to think about like whether maybe that is worth ruining our lives for the next 3 decades? So I'm with you. They are saying that they have arrows in the quiver and various, stupid talking points like that. You're right. We don't know what they are.
I don't trust them.
And I don't trust them
worth a damn. All they've threatened so far is that when Biden is elected, which won't happen because the fucking election's not going to be real if this all, we don't have a guarantee that we have a majority in 3 months. So we need to do something now.
Yeah.
And I think that they have historically been resistant to using the leverage that they do have because they don't like being made into villains.
Yeah.
But I think that there comes a time to play hardball. And it's not that I'm suggesting that they have to. I'm just saying these are not the people who have the courage to play hardball. Chuck Schumer does not have the courage to play hardball. We have this is not our first crisis moment. We've been in a constitutional crisis for years.
Yeah.
And he has failed to play hardball for any of these moments. They failed to get their own Supreme Court justice pick a vote for 1 full calendar year.
Yeah.
They then somehow didn't create any sort of procedural diversion to prevent that seat's replacement from going through in a Republican Senate. The Senate and the presidency are not elected by the popular vote and are not representative of the popular vote. Yeah. And that should be something they say every single day.
I was going to say, there has to be, they don't message this well either.
They don't message. They don't even try to message well because they're afraid they'll look mean in their messaging.
Yeah.
Chuck Schumer is famous for being a deal maker, and he hasn't made one fucking deal for this entire crisis of 4 years.
Right. I know.
No, it's infuriating. I don't trust them.
They're already villains too. So like, I don't know why.
Exactly.
And also, Chuck Schumer has been, in some instances acting like he understands that he probably has a primary challenge coming in 2022. I mean, like he's moved.
Well, he does. Yeah.
He's moved left on like stupid things, like not stupid things, but I mean like on marijuana and things like that, just because I think that he sees the writing on the wall for him. I think that this is a moment where he could really potentially fend off a primary challenge if he can make some sort of like wild stand here. I mean, literally like just
tell you what he's not going to be capable of doing though.
I know that.
I know him well. I know who in the New York delegation is capable of wild stands, and it's not him.
Sure.
It is, if any New York senator is going to make a wild stand, it's going to be Gillibrand. I don't think she's going to do it because I don't think she has any ability to in this environment, but she's the courageous one of the two of them. And there's just not, I don't see a hope that he figures this out. This is not his style of deal making.
Yeah.
He is not up to this moment. He was up to a different moment, a moment when there was consensus governance, a moment when there was bipartisanship, a moment when making deals with Republicans was how you got things done. That was a moment that Chuck Schumer was up to, but we're not in that moment right now. And I think we're also, one of the disadvantages that we have is we don't have any young people in the Senate to have any perspective on this. Think about, like I was talking about this with my mom the other day, where I was like, I feel like when I go to New York City, I am literally looking at a different city than someone who has just gone for the first time, because I'm seeing my home New York City, the New York City of the 90s, layered into the city. So the things that I focus on are historical New York things. They're not new buildings. I'm surprised to see those weird, middle finger buildings just every single time I look at the skyline, because I don't expect them to be there. Because the New York City that I see looks like the 90s New York that I grew up in. And new people come to New York and they think it's a city entirely of middle finger buildings. I feel like we have a Senate that is seeing a Senate that existed 30 or 40 years ago, and they don't realize that the moment is shifting. And they don't have the ability to see it because they are still seeing a Senate that functions almost like it did 40 years ago, but they're not seeing what isn't working. And new eyes are really critical in a moment like this, because somebody who is comfortable in this new political environment, who grew up in this new political environment, is what is needed when you have to think of a creative solution to the problem of having a sociopath running the Senate. And there's just no one there who is capable of looking with new eyes at the Senate. They all are stuck in a version of the Senate that isn't how the Senate actually operates. And that's why Mitch McConnell gets away with all this stuff. In any case, here are 6 senators to really put the pressure on.
Yes.
And
here, let's tell you the numbers on it first.
Others.
Just in terms of whether this, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, how quickly they can get these people hearings, how quickly those hearings can get done, whether they are trying to get this vote done before the election, which seems like they probably are. But right now, as we know, the Senate is 53 to 47. You would need basically 4 people to flip, because it's 50-50, then you have Mike Pence and come in, and you can no longer filibuster this any longer. So they only need 51 votes. We have 2 already, Murkowski and Collins. They have both, within the last few days, said that they are not going to be voting on this.
Those are both seats that the Republicans frequently cover for, though. So those mean almost nothing.
Right. So there's oftentimes when those 2 say that they are voting no on something, it's because they have been given permission to do so, because something can still pass without them. And that allows them to continue keeping whatever sort of like mysterious credibility that they have as being, moderates, even though they neither are. Then there's Romney, who we have not heard from yet.
Surprise.
Cory Gardner, who will read you what he said here when we read through what everybody said a little bit, but he definitely rode hard with Mitch McConnell in 2015 on the Merrick Garland situation, and he is up for re-election in a state that is increasingly blue and is probably going to have to think long and hard about what he wants to do here. Then there's 2 others who might be a little bit more surprising. I referenced Lamar Alexander earlier today, but both Lamar Alexander and Pat Robertson have been in the Senate. They remember the Senate like you were just talking about, right? They remember it as a place that functions. And part of the reason why they remember it as such is because the Senate is sort of like known for being this institution that like follows precedent and does all of these things. So they think that that's still where they are for whatever reason. Although I think they know that that's not where they are, because I think that's in part why both of them are retiring. And that's
I was going to say Pat Roberts and Lamar Alexander are both retiring,
and that's
because they're lost.
So they could... they could just screw us on the way out the door, which I think they would
they could John McCain this,
doing. Or they could John So,
I think there's a few things that I think give us more and less leverage depending on the circumstance. I think the fact that so many Republicans are so fed up with things that they're retiring does work to our advantage. I also think, though, that you're going to see it. I think that we will see closer to Election Day that as it becomes clear that they might very well lose the Senate. Susan Collins is going to lose her seat, most likely. Murkowski is not up this year, but I think some of these folks are Cory Gardner is very likely going to lose his seat, or at least close to losing his seat. And there's some others as well. I think and there's a special election before Election Day as well in New Mexico. So, I mean, anything could happen. But I think if it looks like they're definitely going to lose the Senate, you're going to see all these people vote yes on a justice, because it's just going to, and if it looks like they have to actually play ball, then that's when we start having some leverage with Collins and Gardner, because I think Collins has already thrown away her legacy. She already is going to be remembered.
And that's why she might lose that Senate seat right now anyway.
Exactly. And I think that because of that, there's no reason for her to hold the line on this if she's not going to win. And I think she would certainly vote yes on a lame duck appointment if she was on her way out.
Right, if she was on her way out.
Fucking nonsense person.
Yeah.
And I think the same is true of Cory Gardner. I think, in order to maintain their contacts post losing their seats, they're going to want to play ball. So it really, we have to, it's going to be how these races play out that really plays a role, I think, in how dedicated some of these people are to the party versus their principles.
Yep.
Because we've been burned in the past. We have Kavanaugh because of a very Susan Collins-y situation.
Yeah.
But there are many, many other senators who are on the record saying that they would never appoint a Supreme Court justice in an election year. They did it in 2016 because they were trying to not appoint Merrick Garland. And we're going to tell you who all of them are. And you should call all of them and tell them that they're nonsense people.
Yep.
Lindsey Graham being the most obvious. He's backtracked on this long ago.
Of course. Yeah.
He was certain back in 2016 that this was a terrible idea. But so basically, I think another hilarious layer of this is, we did this when Scalia died, and the impetus that they were using, the argument that they were using the Republicans were using to justify not appointing Merrick Garland was actually something they were calling the Biden rule, because it was based on something that Joe Biden had said in a Judiciary Committee hearing in 1992 about a hypothetical Supreme Court appointment, saying that his committee should consider not scheduling confirmation hearings on potential nominees until the campaign season is over. Now, because of that, even though he wasn't referencing any specific seat, the Republicans have taken to calling this rule that they made up in 2016 the Biden rule, which added a new layer of confusion to.
Well, that's smart.
They're good at this.
Right. Yeah.
They're good at this, and we are bad at this. But so the advocates of the Biden rule are wide and deep, and here they are. Cory Gardner, we know. John Cornyn of Texas. Ted Cruz, his reasoning is that we hadn't appointed someone in an election year in 80 years, which is a random number of years he made up. So we shouldn't do it again. Which is like, if your rule for precedence is that you haven't done something in an arbitrarily convenient number of years for a thing that is rare in the first place, that's not really a precedent. That's just a time that something hasn't happened by chance. In any case, Marco Rubio, Jim Inhofe, always the worst. Chuck Grassley, who has said nothing despite having a lot to say about pigeons in the last few days. But we don't know where he stands on this now. Joni Ernst, she's on the record already backtracking, and she's in a tight race, so we'll see how that plays out. Tom Tillis in North Carolina, David Perdue in Georgia, Tim Scott in South Carolina, Ron Johnson in Wisconsin, Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania, Richard Burr in North Carolina, Roy Blunt in Montana, John Hoeven in North Dakota, also a fan of the 80-year figure, and Rob Portman of Ohio. Those are all people that in 2016 went on record saying that they approved of the Biden rule.
Yeah.
Some of those people are up for re-election right now, though. And so I think, there is, certainly we know both of Georgia's seats are up. That Purdue seat is one of the seats. That might be the open seat, though. Is that the open seat? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think so.
I think he's leaving also.
Right,
he's not trustworthy, but he's leaving.
Yeah.
But so we have just a lot of people on record who are currently in a position to vote on this.
Yes.
That have said that that election year appointments are not something that they can do. And certainly I think it doesn't benefit them to do this anyway, because I think then suddenly packing the court is going to become tremendously popular as an idea. And I don't think they want that, because
I don't think they want that either.
Then nothing means anything anymore.
And if you're wondering about that, that is actually not so hard to do, because
we've been done twice before.
I was going to say, we've changed the number of Supreme Court justices multiple times, and it's not in the Constitution, so you don't need an amendment, and we don't care about the filibuster anymore. So you basically just need 51 votes and Congress to pass. It's
so non-controversial that Pete Buttigieg was in favor of it during the election season.
Yep.
That's how
a person who didn't have a stance on anything.
He had no ideas or stances, and that was one of his only clear talking points.
Yeah.
The entire campaign cycle was packing the court. So I feel like this is maybe not territory they want to get into, but I think the one thing that Mitch McConnell knows, which I know, which everyone knows, which is why this is not a credible threat, is that the Democrats will make a bad deal for themselves in an effort to be fair as soon as they have control anyway. They will never act brashly or boldly in this moment, and he has the protection of knowing that.
Yep.
So what we have to do is act brashly and boldly.
Is do that. Surprise him.
We have to do it. Surprise him.
Shock him.
Catch him off guard. Do something nuts. And then also, I would contend, this is not usually where I stand on this issue, but I think Nancy Pelosi should shut down the government, because we're not getting a COVID relief bill anyway.
Well, that's what I'm
the
saying.
point that they can't provide any basic governance at a time of massive crisis.
Right.
Who fucking cares if they're in session?
Shut it down. And that is what I feel. And also, you know, I kind of mentioned it when we were talking about things that they could do before, but, you know, you have to look also at, you know, like what are, you know, there would be some short-term effects and probably even some long-term effects from shutting down the government.
It'd be terrible.
It would be terrible, right? There would be long-term effects. Like, you might be dead by the time the effects are over of allowing them to seat another Supreme Court justice.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that you have to look at your options here.
You have to look at your options.
Yeah.
And I think that I know that it's something they don't want to do because they want to look like the party of responsible governance before the election. I also don't think that their continued inability to do anything about any of this helps them get elected.
I agree.
It makes them look weak and ineffectual, which they are, which makes it so that everyone, that's why everyone can walk around being like, it doesn't matter if I vote.
Yeah.
Because if the opposition party isn't ever going to do anything, and by the way, we had a whole era where we were held captive by a slim majority in the Senate when we had Democratic governance in every other chamber.
Yep.
So, I mean, we don't, if the Republicans get an edge anywhere, even in the minority, they're a fucking pain in the ass.
Right, I know.
So,
why can't we be?
Let's try something.
Yeah.
Let's go bold. In any case.
Yeah.
The boldest thing that any Democrat did this week was coining the term climate arsonist.
Love that.
I mean, that's the first good idea Joe Biden's had in campaign terms in months.
He gave a big climate speech, gave it outside in Delaware, and had a huge run-in with a fly. Which was, you know, not great. But anyway.
Like Pete Buttigieg's debate run-in with a fly. Do you remember when he had a fly in his head and he just didn't know it?
Amazing. Yeah.
That was a great moment in American history.
But yeah, he gave this big speech. He gave it on the day. He was basically trying to preempt Trump on this because it was the same day that Trump came out to California, which, you know, we didn't want him to do, but he probably felt like he should come just to go and, you know, be able to have pictures pointing and staring, you know, things burning.
Denying climate change, whatever he wanted to do when he was out here.
Yeah. So anyway, but Biden said, if you give a climate arsonist 4 more years in the White House, why would anyone be surprised if we have more of America ablaze? If you
it's like his first good line of the entire campaign.
I know, right? If you give a climate denier 4 more years in the White House, why would anyone be surprised when more of America is underwater? And he sort of like kept with that whole sort of like climate arsonist, like giving him 4 years. What could you do? I also like this line too. He said, you know what is actually threatening our suburbs? Wildfires are burning in the suburbs in the West. Floods are wiping out suburban neighborhoods in the Midwest. That's another good line.
Wait, why is this the first clever speech that he's been able to deliver this entire time?
Yeah.
Can this person write all of his speeches?
Well, and that's the thing, you know, it's made me wonder about that too, because, you know, the one thing that Biden promised in the campaign that I never believed, obviously, but it was like still a thing that he was promising, was that he was the type of person that knew how to take on Trump, that knew how to take on a bully, that, you know, like that was a thing that like we were constantly promised, was that he was the person who like knew what this campaign was going to be all about. And I feel like I always knew that was hogwash, that was malarkey, if you will.
Right.
But we haven't, I was right, is what I'm saying, because we haven't seen any of that. Like I was going to say, this is the closest thing, right? So
like he needs somebody who can coin a term like alternative facts. Like he needs his Kellyanne Conway. He needs somebody who will go to the mat for him, coming up with cockamamie genius ideas that catch the zeitgeist and are used by everyone in America within 1 week.
Yeah.
Because I can't tell you how often I talk about alternative facts. You know? Mm-hmm. I mean, totally. Kellyanne Conway, for all of her flaws, is a genius messenger.
Yeah.
So
totally.
And Obama had that quality. And he had speechwriters who now just run crooked media. So I guess they're not available. I don't know. But like, I don't know why there's not some 25-year-old somewhere in America that can be the Jon Favreau of Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that looks like, because he's not as good a speaker as Obama, and part of the Jon Favreau mystique was because he had a great performer delivering his lines.
Yeah.
But I don't understand why in a nation of 300 million unemployed people, Joe Biden can't find a single person to message to anyone in his coalition. I get the Biden for Progressives emails forwarded to me frequently. And the amount of tone deaf that they are is like sometimes shocking and appalling in a way that shouldn't even be, because I don't trust them to campaign to progressives. Like,
right.
I just I don't understand why he hasn't been able to deliver a speech with a term like climate arsonist on every topic that he currently has any position on.
I agree.
America's schools,
Sure.
School arsonist. Healthcare arsonist. Come up with a term.
Yeah, come up with a term.
In any case, good job once to Joe Biden.
Yeah, let that guy keep writing, or gal.
Keep hiring that person. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a guy. Let's be honest. It's Joe Biden's campaign.
Oh yikes! Yes. Probably right.
He also did a town hall this week. That was a drive-in town hall, and we have a bone to pick with not him, but the media surrounding this town hall, because literally every news source made it sound as if he had personally invented the idea of doing drive-in events and had resolved this long-standing pandemic issue that we're having by coming up with a creative solution. There's not a single, you can go to a drive-in comedy show in LA, you can go to a drive-in movie, you can go to a drive-in drag show, you can go to a drive-in anything show in LA, and have been able to since March. So it
was the immediate solution to all of our entertainment problems.
Right. There's literally not
to do it from your car.
Performance-related thing that you can't do in a car right now in Southern California. So
there's dance parties. You can go see DJs. It's like.
Who do they think invented this? Who in his campaign thinks that this, or who's been operating this? Who in media, who's been just reading media, thinks that Joe Biden invented this idea? Yeah. It was also a stupid town hall.
Well, that's the thing. We don't have a ton of, it was a couple days after the Trump town hall, which you did hear about. We don't have a ton of, stuff to tell you about that. But that's when Trump talked about how he actually upplayed the, pandemic when somebody asked. And he was like, say what you want about him. Part of the reason why the Trump town hall felt so uncomfortable is just because Trump doesn't know how to interact with actual human beings. And he also doesn't know the right answers to any of their questions. So just the interaction of being asked a question and then attempting to answer it feels like he's being taken to task just because because he can't do that interaction. That's not a thing that he has the competency for. But he did really sort of get grilled. Even to the point where people were like, let me finish my question, right? There was that woman asking him about healthcare or whatever, who was told him to stop interrupting her. And then this town hall was 48 hours later, and it was literally a bunch of Democrats who Joe Biden recognized from various points in his life, because this was at the Scranton minor league football field. He took a question from a guy who was the old police chief, and he was like, hey, I met you when we were at this thing back in which is sort of the whole Biden shtick anyway.
His whole thing is that he remembers every person he's ever met.
The town hall felt, especially in comparison, and I think it would have felt this way anyway, but it felt very softball. It felt very packed.
Yeah.
And so
remember that Biden event we went to in Iowa, which even in a small town in Iowa was packed with random supporters, like a mayor from Massachusetts and whatever. So the whole audience, he spent the first hour pointing to random people in the audience, and it turned out he knew all of them. Yeah. This is a Biden campaign specialty.
Yeah, no, it totally is. But CNN shouldn't have let that be the Biden campaign specialty.
Exactly.
Right? If Anderson Cooper is hosting this and CNN is putting it on, then you don't let the Biden campaign have all 16 questioners be somebody that Joe Biden knew from his past life in Scranton.
I'll tell you who could put on a good Joe Biden town hall. You're not going to want to hear this from me. It's going to be Fox News. Right. If anyone can put on a good town hall for a Democratic candidate.
Totally.
That gives them the opening to actually address the issues that those mysterious swing voters he seems to be after are actually looking to hear about. It's a Fox News town hall.
Yep.
Because they're not even smart enough to entrap you at those town halls. No. They just ask you about hot button issues and then give you an opportunity to make your pitch. And even though they don't agree with your pitch, you still get the audience.
Yep.
Everyone is doing everything wrong so much of the time in these campaigns that I just don't know how to proceed.
Yeah.
In any case, don't watch a Biden town hall if you are planning to vote for Joe Biden, because it will make you annoyed. And it's better to just blindly vote for him at this point and think about all
That's what everybody's doing anyway.
Vote on.
Nobody's voting for Joe
much.
Biden because of some genius response to like the old police chief of Scranton at a CNN town hall, like,
or just in response to any idea he's had. It's don't even look at his. Don't worry about it. I know this is not usually our advice, but there are some really important things happening down ballot in almost every district.
Yeah.
Your state legislature is very important. Your props are important. We're about to start talking about those. Your congressperson is important because that's who you actually call when you have an issue, not the president.
Yep.
Don't even listen to Joe Biden.
Yep.
Ignore that whole thing that's going on. Get pumped to get angry about Prop 22 instead.
Yeah.
There are 2 props that are in my crosshairs this week. I'm going to bring you 2 props that are in my crosshairs every week. The only prop that's not in my crosshairs at all is the rent control prop, because you should just blindly vote yes on allowing rent control. It's the same prop we had a year ago.
Right.
And you should not even ask questions to yourself.
There's some other ones that should not be in your crosshairs, but I'm
no, some of them are in my crosshairs in good ways.
Yeah. Oh, right.
You know, like Prop 15 is in my crosshairs in a positive way because I want to explain at some point why it's so important you vote yes on it.
Yeah, right. Okay, good.
Prop 14 and Prop 22 are in my the rent control prop's just not in my crosshairs because we voted on it last year. So it's just like, we already know the answer. Don't let dumb real estate money tell you to vote the wrong way on a prop where you know the answer already. Just like, use your brain. Prop 14 and Prop 22 are the 2 that are in my crosshairs today. Prop 14 because it's stupid, and Prop 22 because it's greedy and evil.
Right, and we already voted on
litigated
this. This is law.
Yeah.
Right, the legislature did this for us.
Prop 14 is asking Californians about whether we should re-up our prior investment in stem cell research, research funding.
Right. We started this thing called the California Institute of Regenerative Medicine.
Right.
Like in the, I think 2004, right? And it was in the midst of George W. Bush had just basically like mandated that like we couldn't use any stem cell research like at the federal level because
so no federal money could go to stem cell research.
Right. And so we started this institute, which basically
buffed ourselves up,
right,
kicked in the money.
Right. Which basically just doled out that money to like research facilities. Basically, it's pretty much what it did. It was just like an institute to give others grants.
We were basically acting as the federal government, but we, the Californians, were having to finance it.
Right. It was funded through, I think it was supposed to go through 2017 or 2018 or something like that. So it's like basically out of money now at this point. And every single prop guide that I have seen says that you are to vote yes on this. We should continue doing this important research, blah, 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 blah. Lila texted me this week and was like, I think I'm a no on Prop 14. I was immediately scandalized.
Yeah.
And then
this is a common theme with our relationship.
Right. And then she started telling me why. And then 7 hours later, when I had finished reading everything that I could find on the internet about it, I was with her, and I will let her explain it to you and maybe chime in every once in a while. But I think the point that like I would like to make before you talk specifically about the prop is that both of these 2 props are good examples of why the system that we have here is trash. Correct. Because it took me being convinced by Lila and then also spending a literal afternoon of my time trying to get to the bottom of this.
Of one of 12 props.
Right, exactly, right? So, and I haven't even seen any commercials on this, which when you get to Prop 22, all you do is like see commercials that are
on your phone, they're in your head, they're on the TV, they're on
that are just like filled with misinformation. And so like you're not even seeing that on Prop 14. So God forbid they start advertising and further confuse matters. Yeah. But like to have an expectation that voters are going to have done what you and I did that afternoon as we were working on the voting guide is not it.
It's not reasonable.
It's not reasonable.
Well, and this is also something that no person should have to have even a half-formed opinion of. I don't want to know about this. I want someone else who has the full context of where our budget money goes, i.e. the legislature, to say, okay, here's how much money we have. Here's the kind of spending that we want to prioritize. Here's what we can give to this program.
Yeah.
I want to elect someone who shares my priorities, those being that I think stem cell research is a good idea. But that I also think a lot of other things are a good idea. Schools are a good idea. Roads are a good idea. You know, air is a good idea. I mean, there are so many things. Sure. I want them to sit down and say, okay, here's all the money and what we're spending it on. Here's how much money we can give to this one kind of research.
Yeah.
Instead, I am having to context-free dive into what it means for us to give another $5 billion to this research. That requires me to A, find out if there's been any promising advances from this research, which is not a field that I specialize in or care about.
Yep.
B, finding out whether those advances ultimately will be of the benefit to the people of California or the people of America.
Right.
C, finding out where this money traditionally had come from before Californians started financing it.
Well,
D,
and
finding
also,
out who's lobbying for it and why.
Yeah.
All things I don't need to know about.
Right. And also like looking at, you know, you and I were talking about when, in regards to funding, I was, you know, I think a lot of people don't even really know what a bond is actually, because what they're doing is they're selling $5.5 billion worth of government bonds, and then they're paying back interest on those, right? Like
so
that's what you do when you buy a bond.
$7.8 billion in Californians terms.
Right, exactly. So it's like not even $5.5 million. It's like closer to $8-something billion. So it's like to even, and that's not even probably going to be in the write-up when you like look at this. So it's costing,
also, what does that mean?
More than, right, exactly. So it's
does
costing
that
more
money,
than it's even claiming that it costs.
What could that money be funding? What would that money be taking something? I mean, we don't have any context for it. It couldn't be dumber. And the reason that props like this end up on our ballot is usually because one wealthy person gets their nails into it. Their claws into it, and decides that Californians are, you know, remember the time that tomato factory owner had us voting on like a water prop, and it was like his personal irrigation system that he wanted us to pay for. It was like something ridiculous like that. That's what's happened here. So first of all, it's dangerous to come out against this prop as a Democrat, because obviously we all think stem cell research funding is a great idea, and that all of the people who are scandalized about it are being nonsense people.
Yeah.
And that includes the Bush era officials who initially banned that funding. But here's the thing. That ban was lifted in 2009 under Obama. So that ban no longer exists. So the thing that no one is mentioning about this prop is it's asking the people of California to finance research that should be federally funded. It is asking us to carry the debt load for the rest of the nation on this issue. And that is where my opposition came in. Because as much as I think there are times that you have to suck it up and vote to pay for things that you don't want to pay for that are annoying. And there are also times that you have to suck it up and realize that the federal government is incompetent and that they maybe are not going to devote the resources they should to a thing that you think is important. This is not a fair precedent to set for the people of California. We pay tremendously high taxes. We are in a huge budgetary crisis. And to ask us to continue to shoulder the burden for the rest of the nation in doing, you know, in leading in stem cell research funding is a really unfair position to put us in.
Yeah.
And I agree with every conservative paper in California about that, which has made me question what my situation is. But I think that what's happened is that it's because of the sort of moral conversation around stem cell research funding, because of where that landed us in the early 2000s, it is very difficult for Democrats to come out against funding stem cell research, because it sounds like they are legitimizing a cockamamie ridiculous argument that stem cell research funding is somehow inhumane.
Right.
And that's not the situation.
Right. And that's not our issue with this prop.
And that's not our issue with this prop.
We don't agree with them. And in addition to, you know, I think your core opposition to this in regards to it being funded by one rich person, you know, if there's other reasons to vote against this, even if you don't have that exact same issue that Lila does about some of these props, like, and that's sort of like where I kind of like came around on probably no on this, because what I started to do was actually looking into this CIRM. That's the organization that gets this billions of dollars. And, you know, they have had a lot of issues over the years with conflicts of interests. They have a board of like 30 some people, and a lot of those members of the board are heads of facilities that have received this money over the years. And they have been the state legislature, when Sheila Keel who's now a county supervisor, was in the state legislature, she called for them to be investigated for some of these issues. And they had a ton of problems there as they were running out of money. This guy, this
Robert Klein
person, a
Palo Alto real estate investor, Robert Klein,
attempted to have this privatized under like the San Diego State School of Medicine or something like that, and have it be privately funded. He has also tried to like take the organization to be privately funded, and was like looking for like $300 million worth of private funding and couldn't find it. So he's also
concerns me, because it feels like it's really common that something like this be funded through philanthropic efforts. I know we don't agree with that kind of philanthropy, but like if in a world in which a lot of these sort of very specific medical research areas are funded by private philanthropy, why are taxpayers in California the ones on the hook for this?
Right. And that's what I don't feel like I need to be responsible for giving someone $5 billion when he couldn't find 1/10 of that from the amount of rich people that we have in the state of California, who you would think would probably be into funding something like this in the first place.
Yeah. No, and I know from experience, because I've served on a federal advisory council that is related to guiding medical research efforts in a very specific field like this. Medical research is incredibly political. How medical research is funded is incredibly political. And so a lot of the time it feels like, because it's science, that we should sort of like, that we should presume that all medical research is being done in a way that is ethical and sort of, and I'm not suggesting that this is not, but all I'm saying is that the voters of California are not in a position to know or not know this, and should not be in a position to have to decide if this is where their money goes.
That's it.
Somebody else should be in charge of this. And I don't think that it's good to set a precedent for people who have a pet issue like this coming forward and asking taxpayers directly for very specific kinds of funding. I think that they should have to lobby the federal or the state government like everyone else for that money. And I think that is really what grounds my opposition, is that I think it sets a dumb precedent, and it creates precedent for more of these ridiculous props. I mean, remember the dialysis prop? Well, we have another one this year.
That's back.
Why are we voting on these?
Enough, I'm sure.
Certainly. The only reason it's not in my crosshairs now is because I refused to research it, because I was so mad about Prop 14 that I was just like, I'm going to wait till next week on that other one. So that one's infuriating. Prop 22 is incredibly duplicitous and is currently the most expensive prop in California history, and possibly in the nation's history. It is being funded largely by ride-sharing apps who want special treatment under California law so that they can continue to have their employees be independent contractors. That means they don't have to pay benefits to those people. They don't have to pay towards unemployment for those people. They don't have to pay into retirement funds for those people. That saves them a huge amount of money and is the basis of their model, but it is not a smart precedent for us to set. People, especially in an environment where no one has any fucking work, should not be working in exploitive jobs like this. And the thing that I think is really cynical about it is it actually essentially asks those exploited workers to become mouthpieces for a policy that exploits them. Because
if you're in California right now and you're a person who watches any form of television, the reason that this is so expensive is because you're seeing, I mean, there's advertisements everywhere. There's ads in app.
Well, and
also.
it's
like
on your, they're in-app ads. Like, it's on your phone.
Right. But it's also like literally the television commercial is like a bunch of Uber and Lyft drivers telling you, the viewer, how great and wonderful it is that they get to be treated like, you know, subhumans.
Well,
like,
and when I was asked to sign the petition for this prop, and I refused. But it was a woman who was an Uber driver who asked me to sign the petition, and she was like, "But I'm an Uber driver, and I'm telling you I want this." And I kept saying, "But I'm an independent contractor, and I'm telling you I want to be treated like an employee at my work." And this creates an exception that's not fair, because then every industry can pursue this route. This is no longer a meaningful law if it's not actually holding the most exploitive independent contractor employers up to
and
the
the reason that they need to do this is because we already passed a law in the state of California where they can't do this, right? And so, like so many, and it's the same throughout industry. I think in some entertainment jobs they made some exceptions, but like even still, if you're working a certain amount of hours, you have to be like. So there's only so many ways around it. But
the state basically limited these companies' ability to hire lots of contract labor instead of treating them like employees, and it was very intentionally designed to address a lot of these tech apps that use a huge amount of freelance labor.
It was directed solely at them.
Right. And so they're trying to now get special exemption from that because their business model was based on the presumption that they could be exploitive employers. But I don't think that we have a responsibility to protect their status as exploitive performers.
If you can't function, if your business cannot function without being exploitive,
then you don't have a good business model.
Then exactly. Then you don't get to function.
You don't get to function. And I think that's something to keep in. I think a lot of drivers for Lyft and Uber have been told they will lose their jobs if this, and this is the thing. This is a tremendously successful service, and I don't actually think they want to give up the entire California market. They have left and come back to markets before.
Yeah.
I wouldn't trust their threats to disappear from the California market. I don't think that the people who are affected by this are in a position to necessarily understand the ramifications of giving special exemption to these large tech employers. And it's a tremendously complicated policy. And just like that woman, at the farmer's market, where I had to be like, no, this has ramifications for me. This is not just about you. And I know that because I'm an independent contractor, but I don't know that everyone else does know that. And I also don't know that that's well understood in the pool of drivers that are advocating for this policy.
Yeah.
I think that's something to keep in mind as you hear advertising and talk to people about this policy, is that there's almost that it does directly affect you, by the way. Like if you are a person who works in California, it does directly affect you, even if it doesn't seem to. And that this is an incredibly dangerous giveaway to these very powerful tech companies who have built their business on exploiting labor. Totally. And that is not, I often say, I don't think it's the consumer's responsibility to make up for these problems. I think it is the government's responsibility to regulate them. So I always say,
it has to be. Well, they're not going to do it themselves.
It is not my job to stop using plastic cups. It is Starbucks' job to figure out a way to stop serving everyone in plastic cups. It is not my job to not be able to use a ride-sharing app. It is our government's job to make sure that the driver in that ride-sharing app is being treated fairly. I don't think that individual consumers should have this responsibility constantly, but it's constantly foisted upon us because we don't act. And this is a time where California was finally willing to act in the interest of all Californians, and they're trying to get special treatment under it.
Yeah.
So they are in my crosshairs.
Yeah.
Lila out.
No, not yet. We have one more story.
Not yet, because we have one more very important story, which is we finally got an update on the Chuck Grassley hitting a deer story from 2012. It only took 8 years. But Chuck Grassley tweeted, in a time of great national consternation about the direction of the nation and the fact that we might be in a constitutional crisis soon because of the death of RBG, he tweeted, if you lost your pet pigeon, it's dead in front yard. My Iowa farm just discovered. Here are identifiers. Right leg blue, then a bunch of numbers. Left leg green band, no printed info. Sorry for bad news. Then,
pigeon spelled like the dialect.
Like the language and not like, or the not language. Pigeons are not languages. They are almost languages. A pigeon language is when two different language groups have to create some sort of dialogue for like commerce purposes. And so it's not a full language, but they can communicate.
Yeah, he's got it spelled P-I-D-G-I-N.
Right. A pigeon, the bird, which is what he's referring to, is spelled P-I-G-E-O-N, and that's known by all people. Then he followed with, I assumed deer dead because it was night and no carcass. I wonder if he got a bunch of responses to that pigeon news asking him how he knew the deer he hit in 2012 was dead.
Yeah.
That was a confounding, and then 2 hours after the initial pigeon post, he followed the deer thing 2 hours after, and then 3 minutes after the deer post, he tweeted, but in case of this pigeon, I could actually pick up bird, no life whatsoever. So he wanted us to know his methodology for finding your dead pigeon in front of his farm.
Yeah, if you can pick it up and it doesn't move, then
and it's also worth noting that he spelled pigeon wrong in multiple tweets. So it's not like he just misspelled it. It wasn't a typo.
Hours later. Yeah.
2 hours later, he still thought pigeon the bird was spelled P-I-D-G-I-N. This is a U.S. senator.
Yeah, and he also is
a wildlife expert, apparently.
Right. Well, and he's also from the Trump school of tweeting in terms of just like random misspellings, random capitalization. There's like if you look at these tweets, I mean,
carcass is misspelled.
Right.
He instead of Y-O-U, he writes U, like he's a teenage girl.
Right.
Your is U-R.
Just
Some of
discovered
it's capitalized.
was in all caps.
Right.
Yeah.
Right and blue are capitalized, but not right leg. Like right leg blue, the right and the blue are capitalized. Some of it's punctuated, others not. All of the I's are lowercase.
Mm-hmm. Head of the committee who will be looking into whether we get a new Supreme Court justice.
That's right.
By the way, Chuck Grassley, head
Chuck
of the
Grassley.
Judiciary.
That's right.
Yeah,
so this is
think
a
about
man
that, guys.
who doesn't seem as concerned as Mitch McConnell with what they're going to do in the Senate, but has spent a lot of the weekend concerned about a dead pigeon.
Yeah.
And that is the news this week. We'll be back next week.
That's it.
I'll have more rants about props, I bet.
Yeah. Oh, you probably will. And
I mean,
who knows what's going to happen. One thing that I think that we should stop doing is asking
what could
each
possibly go wrong
other
next.
and the universe, like, how much worse 2020 could get.
Right. Yeah, don't.
Because I feel like
it could get worse. Just assume.
Because it has just obliged us with answers.
Yeah.
The universe, right? It's like something bad happens and we say, universe, what's going to happen in October? And then
something does.
Inevitably, we will find out. So I think that we should all take a moment and stop doing that.
I had thought the universe is also ahead of schedule for my guess, because I thought that RBG might die as the October surprise.
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that we're only in September leads me to believe that many more surprises are in store. And I think be ready for anything, not ready for everything, as my mom said.
Because like
roll
Friday,
with this.
like
anything
literally,
can happen.
Right. I think everyone collectively on Friday after Ruth Bader Ginsburg died was like, again? And then like 3 hours later, you know, the universe was like, well, I got an earthquake for you. Right. And it's like, just don't stop putting on social media, like what more bad things are going to happen. Right.
Put on social media the way that we should have all responded to the earthquake, which I think is how I did, which was, well, of course there was also an earthquake.
Exactly.
Of course something else is going to happen. Don't be shocked when it does. Be ready to act.
Right.
Be
and then don't anxiously ask what's coming next.
No. And also, don't allow yourself to be shocked by things that aren't shocking. Did Mitch McConnell insensitively 2 hours after Ruth Bader Ginsburg died announce that he was going to vote on her replacement? Of course he did.
Yeah.
That wasn't
But you knew
news.
that.
You knew he was going to do that. Don't be scandalized when that happens. Just don't let yourself get wrapped up in things that are terrible that you could have easily predicted would happen. Did Donald Trump in February know coronavirus was serious and then pretend he didn't? Yeah, sure did. Yep. Don't waste your energy on that.
Yeah.
There's no reason to.
I agree.
Only be shocked by legitimately shocking things like earthquakes.
Right.
And with that, we'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye.